As someone who complains a lot when modern fantasy books just feel kind of tropey and generic and aren't really doing anything other than just sort of the basic stuff, hey, I gotta complain about it when it's an older book too. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about Deryni Rising, the first book in the Deryni series by Katherine Kurtz. And this is one I was interested to explore. It's one of those older series that I've meant to get to and try. And eventually, I kind of want to give a shot to most of those types of series. And so I was excited to try this one. This is supposed to be a little bit more like part historical fiction, part fantasy is the way that it's described, which does kind of make sense because this very much feels like it's just sort of, an alternate Arthurian setting. We've got like the Druids versus the church and that type of thing. The names definitely seem like they're coming from there as well. We have our Prince Kelson, who's the son of Brian, the king. We have Morgan, who's our other lord here as well, and the types of things being set up there. And it very much feels like it's sort of doing a sort of really basic premise type of Arthurian story here. Set up while, being in a fictional kingdom of Gwynedd. It's funny though, because reading I was looking at this after the fact, the back of the book, I feel like does not set this up very well at all, and including things that just are simply not true. And it's something I feel like we talk about sometimes today. Books will try to advertise as something they're not. And I feel like both that and sort of just the, generic type of stuff that I complain about today, hey, it still happens. And this isn't a bad book, but this is definitely an example of that. So the back of the book is high magic and low, a sweeping tale of romance. Nope. And sorcery set in the imaginary kingdom of Gwynedd, where the mysterious forces of magic and the superior power of the church combine to challenge the rule of young Kelson, who came to the throne when his father was brutally murdered by the sorceress Carissa. Wouldn't really call it brutal, I guess, but the fate of the Deryni, a quasi-mortal race of sorcerers, and indeed the fate of the 11 kingdoms, rests on Kelson's ability to quash the rebellion by fair means or foul, and even by the prescribed use of magic. Which again, like, almost none of this seems like that actually really reflects what's happening in this book as well. Like, there's not really a rebellion or anything like that. Like, there is the lady Carissa, who's also like another noble, who's also like the shadowed one, and it's a lot of this stuff where I feel like it doesn't actually get explained super well in the book, but again, it feels familiar, so you feel like you kind of can just grasp where it's coming from. But it's this type of book where I feel like a lot of stuff doesn't make a lot of sense and kind of falls apart if you think about it. And I think in your overly dramatic or kind of done thing like that too. And like there's some bits of this that reminded me just a little bit of the show Merlin, except I love the show Merlin here, but like the sort of the base setup. So the back of the book talks about the king Brian is murdered by Carissa. He's poisoned, and the whole way that he's poisoned is she just offers one of like the squires some wine and some random woman, and he offers it to the king, and they have a whole conversation about how just some random woman gave him wine. I'm like, that's not like a great idea. Like, that's like the whole idea of having like tasters and stuff. Like, some lady just gave me this wine, I'm gonna have some. But it only affects the king because of plot convenience. I mean, because of his bloodline of magical powers. It only affects people with that. So he's the only one who dies. And so it's a mix of either people thinking he died of normal causes, or then they're trying to also somehow say, despite the fact they're convinced it was normal causes, that somehow it was Morgan's fault. Because Morgan is the half Deryni lord, and he's not trusted because of his magic, despite the fact that he's like the right hand man of the king, who by all reports is like a well-liked king, but his wife is super against magic. And so yeah, that's kind of the setup there. So already, a little bit silly, a little bit over the top, but the bulk of this book is around Morgan and some allies trying to help Kelson get his magical powers. More so, part of the plan is to also eliminate Morgan because he can help the prince get his magical powers, which we'll talk about in a second. So he like survives. His group is attacked, and he's the only one who survives, which also somehow is suspicious, and people are trying to act like he was involved. But the queen So the prince who's going to become king, his mother is determined to kill Morgan because she doesn't trust him because of the magic, even though, again, he's like very close with her son. So her plan, I guess, is to use the council to have him executed like the day before her son becomes king. And then that's not going to have any like negative impacts. It'll just be fine afterward, I guess. And literally it's resolved by them just waiting long enough and him being like, oh, I am king now. And so I am appointing a new member to the council. So now my side wins. And we're just like, oh, okay. And it's, again, really, really simple, types of stuff that you've seen. And then the bulk of it, like I said, is following, trying to get Kelson his magic because it's hereditary magic that's passed along, and there's some lore to it where it's like it's a way for non-Deryni to get some sort of the Deryni magic. It can be shared, but there's this whole ritual, and naturally, because it's a fantasy book, there's some like instead of anybody actually just knowing how to do it. There's some like riddle that they have to follow, and they have to like find some objects and find some stuff and figure out how to solve the riddle to figure out how to actually transfer the power. Because of course, and again, it's like if this was real, and like yes, the king did die unexpectedly, but he left like a riddle, and the reasoning is because the power can't fall into the wrong hands, and potentially somebody else could use the ritual to get the power. Okay, I can buy that since it is power that is like ritually passed. But like nobody else could figure out the riddle. I mean, like when you're doing a riddle versus like telling a trusted person, I feel like telling a trusted person or at least hiding instructions somewhere. I don't know. It's one of those things where again, it's something you see. If you just don't think about it, it's fine. It's a trope. It's not the worst thing in the world. But again, it's just so much of it hinges on that, and like that's the basis here. There's no like rebellion, there's no magical war. It's just like we need to figure this out, but like also his mom doesn't trust Morgan and the council is iffy, so there's like a little bit of the bickering there, but most of it's just like we got to figure out this riddle. And and naturally, because I've just been spoiling, so let's spoil the whole thing. Naturally, he finally figures it out right at the end when the sorceress Carissa has come. It's not really like everybody knows, despite the fact that she's a noble, apparently like part of the court, sort of. Everybody knows she's like an evil witch too, which is again reminding me of like Morgana, from the Arthurian side. But it's like so she arrives and she's trying to overthrow things, and there's a traitor and all kinds of stuff, and there's some twists that are kind of like meh, but then naturally the 13 just turned 14-year-old person who has had the ritual powers just instinctively just knows how to use it. He figures out the final clue that they couldn't figure out. He gets the power and he just instinctively knows how to use it to defeat Carissa. And it's just like, I mean, come on. It just, again, very basic. And there's nothing here that was like inherently bad. It's a lot of the stuff I felt like very predictable, very tired and overdone. Now, granted, this is a 55-year-old book. I think was that the original version was 1970? It might have been slightly earlier than that too, because this probably is not a first printing. Yeah, okay. This is definitely not a first printing. This is from like the 80s. But yeah, 1970 was the first printing. Fun fact, this is Daryl K. Sweetart. I actually didn't realize that until I was just looking at the flap. So that's fun. But again, so I mean, this is older, but I mean, even then, it's relying heavily on inspiration from other things, and it's not doing enough to differentiate while also not doing anything particularly new or fresh. And it's the same thing that I complain about a lot with modern fantasy, and of late, I've been having a lot of issues with just reading modern fantasy that feels like it's too heavily inspired. It's doing the same things I've read. It's not doing enough to differentiate, or in some cases, just feels like it's full on taking. In more extreme cases, and it's one of those things where I was reading this and I'm thinking about, hey, I'm sure if you look at any time period, you're gonna find some cases of that happening where it's just, hey, we're just using familiar elements, we're doing it in sort of a different way. It's one of the reasons why sometimes it's blatant, like when you're doing a retelling of like Arthurian legend, for example, which this technically isn't, but kind of is in some ways, doing its own thing with it. But when you just straight up say, hey, I'm doing a retelling of this story, or that is one thing. Typically, though, again, you have to do something to differentiate yourself. So sometimes when you just take those elements, and when you read enough of the genre, you'll see that more and more. And that's where sometimes people will read something that's an older book that was the first to do something, or like the first to do it in the way, and it's become more common because other things have taken it. So you have that opposite effect here. But this feels like, in some ways, this probably could have been published today, and I mean, it'd be the same thing. It's just it's pretty basic. It's doing a thing. It's easy reading, and again, this is something where a lot of these older series, whenever I talk to people, like, oh yeah, I read that when I was a kid. I remember really enjoying it, but I mean, I haven't read it since I was 12. And I totally get, if I'm reading this as younger, it's engaging, it's fun, but just as I come back to these things, especially because I've read so much in the genre, that's where I struggle a little bit more. And this is fine. This is a 3-star book. If you're curious, go read it. It's not going to do anything to blow your mind. I am curious if you've read the other Deryni books. Do they get better? Do they do more? I know we sometimes we switch off if we're following like Humanity or the Deryni books, but this just felt really, really simplistic and basic. And so, like I said, I'm not like swearing off the series by any means. It's one of those things where it's a long series. I'm sure there are ups and downs overall with it as well. And, similar to a lot of those series that went for a really long time. But this was just not like it didn't do anything to make me eager to continue the series either. So I would be curious if you've read this. Definitely let me know, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But really, though, those are my thoughts. And like I said, I kind of wanted to talk through about this one spoilery and how I felt about it, and also just with taking that into account, because I don't bash modern fantasy necessarily, but I have found myself just saying a lot of things like, hey, that's why I read so many older titles, because especially if you go and you read something older, and it's a book that's been out for 50 years, 60 years, 40 years, whatever, and it feels fresh. Like, that's so great, because it's something it's not fresh, it's old, it's been out for a long time, but it's just sometimes authors were doing really great things, and it's stuff people don't know about and people haven't found, whereas a lot of times it's just the popular stuff. And I feel like it's somewhat in the case, no matter where you look. I mean, like, you go back far enough, you have Shannara, very, very popular, was just redoing Lord of the Rings. And stuff like that's always happening. You're always going to have stuff like that that's popular, but there's a lot of hidden gems too. And so I'll continue my quest to find those out. And I still feel like I find more of those in older books. There's a lot more of a sample size, though, versus modern. But thought it was, interesting to talk over. Really, though, those are my thoughts on Deryni Rising. So let me know if you've read this, if you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts here, or kind of just the idea of this comparing it to modern fantasy in general as well. Would love to hear your thoughts. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizarding Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun, and we'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.